This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Before we jump into this video, pause it right now and go subscribe to the Hoosier.com website, now a part of On3 Sports, for exclusive content covering the Indiana Hoosiers, including exclusive interviews, live recruiting updates, and much more. Make sure to join our community. We really appreciate it.
And Hoosier Nation, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here on our YouTube page. We got plenty more content on here, including more talking about the Hoosiers podcast episodes, recruiting highlights, press conferences, and much, much more. It literally takes 2 seconds. Just do it right now, get it over with, and then go on and let's enjoy this new episode.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm joined by John Alden and Colin McMahon. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Big show today as we're previewing the 2025 college football season for Indiana. And guys, I mean, we did the draft last week. Zach's not on here to brag, but he kind of kicked our butts.
Oh, so he won the night off. That's what happened. He just wins the night off.
Yeah, exactly. He gets to win. He doesn't have to come on because he killed us in the draft. Yeah.
I was happy though with getting. I think at least when I last looked, I got second place. So I'll take a little bit of second place. I thought I had one of the worst drafts, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so yours looked really good on the graphic. I think, Colin, was it you or me who came in last?
I was dead last. I think it wasn't even close. I think, I didn't look too much past the first day. I think I only had a couple votes, and one of them was me. So that says anything,
Yeah, I was gonna say I had to vote for myself too. Yeah, looking at it, Zach won more than half of the vote he had. Yeah.
Oh man.
Third place for me. Yeah, just not a good performance, but he won the night off. But I guess let's just jump right in. I mean, Colin, you and I talked a ton earlier this week with Coach Griffin on Hoosier Tailgate. So trying to avoid some overlap. So instead of doing a big surprise, we're going to start on the offensive side of football. Colin, I'm going to start with you. Who, offensive MVP for Indiana this year? Who do you kind of have as the guy to lead the way on that side of football?
I feel like the easy answer is Fernando Mendoza. So I'll pivot and I'll pick somebody else. I'm going to go Elijah Surratt, which might be an equally as easy of an answer, but I think he's really going to blossom into his role. Obviously, he was the leading receiver last year, and he was an all-conference player. I think that he could be a first-team all-conference player this time around. I think he could be an all-American type guy, over 1,000 yards, potentially 10 touchdowns. I think that he's going to be a guy that's going to make not only an impact with the way that, he plays, but when defenses have to overcompensate and maybe double team him, he's going to open up a lot of space for Omar Cooper, for EJ Williams, for Jonathan Brady, for the rest of the receivers. And so I think that he's going to be a guy that is going to affect the team on so many levels. He's going to make a positive impact on so many levels. And, for a guy that has been kind of an underdog story his entire career, him not being picked as the best receiver behind Jeremiah Smith, while that may make sense to everybody out there, he's going to use that as a chip on his shoulder. And I think he's really going to prove why he might be the best receiver in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, a normal season, I feel like Elijah Surratt would be hands down the best wide receiver in the Big Ten, but you just happen to have a guy like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State who is just a freak. But I mean,
what's crazy is that kid is only a sophomore. You're going to have him for at least 2 more full seasons in college football.
Yep.
He might be the best wide receiver I've seen in the college game in my lifetime, and he's only a freshman. Obviously, still has a lot more to go, but the stuff he's doing last year, third down, and you're throwing a deep shot to a guy in the national championship, that's one-on-one coverage to a freshman. That says everything about just how talented he is. But back to Indiana, John, your offensive MVP. Who do you got?
So I kind of thought Elijah Surratt was the easy answer. And I guess, you kind of you put him on equal footing with Fernando Mendoza. But just kind of when you look at the wide receiver room in general, you talked earlier, Colin, about Elijah kind of being the guy that everyone's going to be focused on. And I think because of that, you're going to see a lot of other receivers get more attention on occasion whenever guys like Surratt are getting double teamed. So somebody like Omar Cooper Jr., who you also mentioned, he's someone who could have a breakout year. And maybe he's not necessarily someone you expect to be the offensive MVP, but I don't think that means you can rule him out for that necessarily. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for guys like him to step up in clutch situations, because Elijah Surratt, now that teams know what they're going to be expecting from him, as opposed to last year when there were so many brand new pieces to this team in general, it's going to be a lot easier for teams to be prepared for somebody like Surratt. And I'm not trying to discredit anything that you were talking about earlier, because I think it's, like I said, probably one of the easier picks for offensive MVP. But I think you could throw almost anybody in that wide receiver room in that conversation.
Yeah, I love that pick, John. That was my breakout pick, and it was like weird because it's like not really a breakout, as Omar Cooper had a really good year last year, but it's like I see him as someone who could step into being an elite wide receiver in this offense. I'm going to go a different direction. I'm also not going to go Fernando Mendoza. I'm actually going to give the same MVP pick I gave last year, and I think he goes under the radar because of the position he plays, but it's Carter Smith at left tackle.
Okay.
I think he might be the best left tackle in the Big Ten. He's someone who has potential. He could be a first-round pick when it's all said and done after his Indiana career. He's that good. He's been now going to be a 3-year starter. It's just, having like someone at that left tackle position who you just can trust and can just say, hey, he can let him do his thing. It's so valuable, especially against the pass rushers Indiana are going to face when they play at Penn State and Oregon and Illinois. So having someone like that, it's just such a huge add.
When you're throwing Lyman in there too, I mean, Pat Coogan is probably one of the biggest transfer portal guys that Indiana could have gotten in any position. And that's going to be a spot, being the center, of course, that of course really defines how your offense runs. And if things aren't gelling with someone like Coogan, I think you can throw him into that mix as well.
Yeah, I mean, as big of a role as Coogan's going to play on the field, too. He could be an MVP off the field as well. I mean, you kind of saw the leadership develop, like how he's developed as a leader with Notre Dame. And Cignetti talked about it a bit. He's got to earn that trust, but it seems like he's done so. And he's, going to be one of the leaders on that offensive line unit, someone who, he's done it, gone to a national championship, won a bunch of big games in a really tough place to play in Notre Dame. All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. John, I'm going to start with you, so you can maybe steal Colin's answer for your defensive MVP.
I'll go ahead and say this real quick, though. I think there's 3 different positions, at least off the top of my head, that have elite number 1 guys, and that's the defensive line, that's linebacker, and that's your corner. You even kind of got a 1-2 punch at corner with Pons and Amari Farrell. And, of course, linebacker, I'm talking about Aiden Fisher. But I think your number 1 defender is Mikael Kamara. I know we've talked during the draft episode, somebody drafted Mikael Kamara. He's somebody who's going to be going for, is it the single season sack record or is it the career sack record for Indiana this year? I don't know exactly which stat it is.
I think he was going for single season. I think both, but I think he said single season was like on his target. I think the number was 18, I want to say.
But regardless, he's the type of guy on defense that Indiana's never used to having. Indiana historically has had not just a horrible defense, but specifically a defensive line that would struggle. And that was one of Indiana's strengths last year. And a lot of it is due to somebody like Mikael Kamara. And I think if he's put in the work that he put in last year and he's ready to elevate his game to potentially get ready for the NFL, of course, I mean, he's probably going to be one of the scariest defensive linemen, not only in the Big Ten, but maybe in college football.
Yeah, just having like a disruptor on that front. In that front 4, just someone who can, and he's great in both the run and the pass, which is so valuable at that position where you don't really see that. You see guys, maybe they're elite pass rusher, maybe they're elite against the run. Mikael Kamara does both, ton of tackles for loss, 10 sacks last year. You mentioned going for the sack record, just such a talented player. Colin, who is, unless you have something to add on Kamara, who's your MVP?
I could talk about Mikael Kamara all day. I mean, he's a special player, man. John hit the nail on the head there. I mean, he can do so much, and he's just such a mature guy. I mean, he's mentioned so many times he's going for that single season sack record, but more importantly, he's wanting to help his team. Like obviously he has personal goals he set for himself, but that's all in the space of trying to help his team, right? That's the main goal for him, and so many of the other Hoosiers. And so with that, my defensive MVP is going to be Aiden Fisher. If it was the most talented, I would say D'Angelo Pons. I think D'Angelo Pons is a guy that is going to be a first-round pick next year. If I had to make a prediction, I think that he is just so talented. But Aiden Fisher does so much for the defense outside of just pure talent that I think that he has to be the MVP. Like, not only is he an elite linebacker in both the pass and rush defense, but the way that he's led not only the linebacker unit, but the entire defense, I think that's something that doesn't come along often. Curt Cignetti, he's not the one to give praise for no apparent reason, and he seemingly praises Aiden Fisher almost every single day. Every time he has a press conference, he gets asked about whether it's Fisher specifically or just anything to do with leadership. He brings up Aiden Fisher, without hesitation. I mean, he just says Aiden Fisher is the leader that everybody wants to have, and Indiana is lucky enough to have him. And he's just the MVP of maybe not only the defense, but the entire team. He's the undisputed leader of the team. Obviously, Indiana doesn't name captains, but I think we'd all be silly if we didn't recognize Aiden Fisher as the captain of this Indiana football team. And so because of all his leadership qualities and what he can do on the field as a talented linebacker with a ton of experience and maturity, I have him as my defensive MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the three players mentioned. I'm going to go the other way with Pons, but I'll get to that in a second. Aiden Fisher, it's like the heartbeat of this team. It feels like, they rely on him so much. He's, the quarterback of the defense. Cignetti said that a ton. He's the one calling the plays, communicating with Brian Haynes, but he's also everywhere. You can't watch an Indiana football game. You can't watch that team play. You can't watch them on defense and not hear his name. It feels like every play you hear his name. He's just always around the football and just has a knack for it. He's one of the most fun players to watch at that linebacker position, probably in the country.
Yeah, I think he's the leading returning tackler in the Big Ten, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, he has a knack for finding the ball carrier, and I kept mentioning his leadership, but that kind of understates just how impressive he is as a football player. He has great abilities not only with defending his man, but even somebody who isn't his man. He seemingly always finds where the ball is going. We hear the word twitchy. I think that would be a great word to describe him. And it's like he has eyes in the back of his head. He always has his head on a swivel. And, if he's not making himself better by, getting a tackle himself, he's making everybody around him better by, assisting on a tackle or picking up that extra man. So, you really just can't go wrong with Aiden Fisher. And, it'd be hard to find an area where he has a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And, Indiana's lucky. John, you mentioned three guys, three standouts at three, key positions. Indiana's lucky to have three guys like that. I'm going to go to D'Angelo Pons now. He's my pick. You mentioned him, potential first round guy next year. 5'9" for a corner. He's a little undersized, and it's never been an issue once. He's gone against bigger receivers. I look at Jeremiah Smith. We talked about him as the best wide receiver. He's only a freshman, all these things. He was on an island with D'Angelo Pons. He was on Pons Island, 3 catches, 34 yards. I also vividly remember Pons breaking up a touchdown in that game. We all remember the, pick 6 against Washington. He's had so many big moments, 3 interceptions. I think he had an interception in the playoff game as well against Notre Dame, if I'm remembering correctly.
It was the opening throw from Riley Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who's always there. He makes just a sure tackle or two for the corner position, which is something that kind of goes under the radar a bit. A lot of times you just focus on the coverage aspect. He's someone who makes the tackles when it needs to be, and he's always there. The ball seems to, when quarterbacks seem to test him, they're like, 5'9" corner against our 6'3" receiver. I'm going to throw it up. And, logic says the 6'3" receiver is going to win, and it just hasn't happened. D'Angelo Pons, it's just, he was a late, addition to the squad last year. I think it was a spring transfer. And he may have been the biggest impact, of all the transfers, you could argue, is just having that lockdown, surefire number 1 corner. It's such a good resource, because Brian Haynes can say, hey, you're going to take this guy out of the game, and now we'll play 10 on 10. And Indiana being able to do that this year is going to be so big for them when they play in Oregon and Adante Moore, play Penn State and Drew Auer and these, Luke Altmaier at Illinois and these top quarterbacks. Having an elite corner is such a huge weapon in those matchups. But guys, all right, so overall season predictions now. John, I'm going to start with you. I guess before your record prediction, I'm going to go ask you your ceiling and your floor for this current team.
Okay. I like this question. I'm glad you're doing ceiling, floor, and then the actual prediction, because you got a bunch of different angles to look at it. So best case scenario, it's weird. I have two things written down for it. I have 10-2, but also 11-1, because I think if Indiana truly hits their ceiling, then that means they've found a way not only to win a game like Iowa on the road, but I think that means they take another step forward and beat one of the elites with Penn State and Oregon. I think it'd be first of all, it's going to be difficult to beat one of those two teams, but to beat both of them, I don't think. First of all, you're outmatched talent-wise in both of those games. I just think it'd be really difficult to find a way to win both of those games. So if Indiana could steal one and, of course, win every other game on their schedule, go 11-1, get back to the playoff, that may even just be wishful thinking. I don't know if that's necessarily their ceiling, but I do think if everything clicks and everything moves forward the way that Cignetti is hoping to this upcoming season with a new quarterback, someone more dynamic like Fernando Mendoza, I think that's their ceiling. Now, floor, you got a bit of a different story here. There's a scenario looking at this schedule where you could start off 3-0, but you could very well find yourself sitting at 3-3 if things don't go your way against Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon in back-to-back-to-back games. Of course, there's a bye week sandwiched in between there somewhere as well. And if you're sitting at 3-3, you can still dig yourself out of that and have a good season. But I think at that point, your floor, you have losses to Penn State potentially. Of course, Oregon, we already talked about both of those. You're probably thinking 7-5 at that point. And I would say that would, of course, be a disappointment. Now, if you're talking a few years ago and you're saying Indiana's going 7-5, people are excited about that. I don't think people will be excited nearly as much, though, after having a playoff appearance last year.
Yeah, I think
I'll let you respond. I'll give my prediction as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if Indiana went 7-5 last year, everyone would have been pretty happy with that year one for Cignetti. And now, a year later, it's like 7-5, and it's like everything goes wrong. And that is what would happen if they go 7-5. But John, you're, I guess, actually, I'm going to come back to your prediction and go to Colin's, your ceiling and floor.
I have the exact same ceiling and floor as John. I think that 11-1 is the ceiling. I mean, if we're being realistic, the ceiling is 12-0, right? I mean, you look at
everybody's ceiling, right?
You look at the roster, and it is a roster that has elite players almost everywhere. Offense, especially at quarterback, Fernando Mendoza. I saw a mock draft today that had him going number 1 overall. So, I mean, he's a quarterback that could certainly lead a 12-0 team. And then at the receiver position, Elijah Surratt is a receiver that could certainly lead a 12-0 team. Running backs, IU has 3 solid running backs. I mean, that's in the makings of
Colin, you're getting me excited right now the way that you're talking. That's all I gotta say.
I'm thinking of this logically, because you look at position by position and it just looks like a team that is truly elite. With that being said, I think that we're talking about the realm of possibility here. Obviously 12-0 is possible, but I do think that 11-1 is the true ceiling, only because Autzen Stadium and Beaver Stadium are two places where you can play almost flawless football and still lose. And so I think for them to win both of those games is extremely unlikely. Obviously, it's not impossible, but for the sake of this argument, I will say the true ceiling is 11-1. I would be absolutely shocked, and I don't even want to know what would be happening on the streets of Bloomington if Indiana went 12-0. So the floor, like John mentioned, the 3-3 start is certainly a possibility. It's unlikely. I think that they'll win at least one of those games. But a 4-2 start is a very, very realistic possibility. And I think that at 4-2, you're looking at a situation where you have to run the table to make the playoff. And with guys, having the NFL draft in the back of their minds, I do think that a rough season is unlikely, but 7-5 would not be impossible. And so 7-5 is my true floor. 11-1 is my true ceiling. And obviously we'll get into our predictions. It'll be somewhere in between those, obviously, is what Indiana's record will most likely be.
Yeah, like you guys, 11-1, that's kind of where I have the ceiling. I was kind of curious, so I looked this up, Indiana's history versus Penn State. Indiana's never won on the road at Penn State. 0-13 in the history of the
They've
program.
only beaten them one time ever, believe it or not.
Yeah, or I think twice.
Or no,
now.
twice. Yeah, the second one was
Penix.
Michael Penix.
Yeah.
The first time was when Christian Hackenberg was their quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to say that Penix, you mentioned what the streets will look like. I remember the streets after Penix play, couches
The
burning.
COVID streets, everybody was, I don't know, I wasn't at IU, but I'm sure that was a wild scene being in the middle of
COVID
coronavirus.
didn't exist for one day. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Everyone pretended as if it wasn't a thing that day. But, I see the ceiling 11-1. I think, going to Oregon and Penn State, winning both, I think that's such a tall task. And, I think this Indiana team I think it's better on paper. I think it's more talented than last season. I think, if this team, week 10 played last year's team week 10 at this, currently right now, I think this year's team would win that game. And the floor, though, I am going to go a step lower than you guys. I think 6-6 I see as the floor. I think those first three kind of shoe in. And I mean, I don't see them losing to Purdue. Maryland, UCLA, I think those are pretty, games they should win. UCLA could be tough with, a newer quarterback in Nico Yamaleava. I think I said that somewhat.
Yeah, Tino Sinceri, of course, their offensive coordinator, very familiar with Indiana.
But it's one of those things, there's a bunch of teams on the schedule where if Indiana isn't as good as, we all think they are, and, Michigan State with Aiden Childs could be better, UCLA could be better, Wisconsin could be better, and Luke Fickell, it seems like a make or break year for him. There is a realm of possibilities. I don't think they're going to go 6-6, but it's, it's possible. Obviously, this is me not talking about the potential injury, injury factor. Remember, we all saw the 2021 Indiana team. Penix got hurt, a bunch of other injuries, and just derailed the whole season. But I think if everything goes wrong, outside of injuries, 6-6, for everything going wrong is still, which is, I think everything would have to go wrong for Indiana to end up there. But Colin, I'm going to go back to you for your official record prediction, and then John.
So I've thought a lot about this, and I really do think that Indiana is mature enough to win every single game that they're going to be favored in. And that's assuming that they're favored in Iowa. I think they will be slight favorites in that game. So I think they will pick up 10 wins. I really do. And you saw it last year. Everyone thinks, Indiana went on this magical run, and that kind of implies that they pulled off upsets. Well, they didn't pull off a single upset the entire season. They were favored in 11 games, and they won 11 games. And so I think that because of the way Cignetti coaches his team, because of the way that you have leaders like Aiden Fisher, Mikhail Kamara, Pat Coogan, even though he's a transfer, I think that Indiana is going to be mature enough to not get upset during this season. I think that's the key. If they do win 10 games, they'll probably make the college football playoff. Obviously, you'll have to see how the SEC shakes out. You'll have to see how the rest of the country plays. That's obvious. But I do think that 10-2 is going to be a very solid prediction. Obviously, things can go wrong, injuries, upsets to Indiana, or Indiana upsets Oregon or Penn State. That could all happen. But I think that 10-2 is a very safe, and I'm pretty confident in that prediction. Obviously, losses to Oregon and Penn State, both on the road, both tough environments. And I'm really high on both of those teams. I think those might be two of the top three teams in the entire country. And so if Indiana misses out on the playoff with a 10-2 record and those two losses, then I don't really know what we would be doing, but that's just my 2 cents. But 10-2, I think is going to be what the Hoosiers finish with this year.
John?
I hate to take the role of pessimist because I feel like I've been influenced by a lot of the national perspective, even though I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what they're saying. It's very tough to not only replicate what Indiana did last year, but to exceed it. That's a whole nother level. And of course, I'm not saying that's impossible either, but I do think a record like 9-3 is most likely here. And I'm chalking up 2 of those losses to be Oregon and Penn State. And I think that third one comes somewhere with either Illinois or Iowa, most likely. I think there's a good chance if Illinois loses to Illinois at home, I think they would bounce back on the road that following week on the road at Iowa to kind of make up for it. And of course, you have that bye week right afterward for that tough West Coast road trip in Eugene. And yeah, it's weird saying 9-3 to be a disappointment. I think big picture, a 9-3 year for Indiana, that's not at all a bad season. But whenever you're thinking about replicating or exceeding what you did last year, of course, people who have their mind set on that being the true expectation will be disappointed. But I think if Indiana can get 9-3, first of all, you're probably playing at a really good bowl game. Maybe I doubt you're in the playoff at 9-3, especially being the brand of Indiana. But and here's the thing: I know the bowl games are very strange nowadays. You'd probably get a lot of opt-outs in that scenario, just for those who are aspiring to go to the NFL, of course. But overall, if that ends up being the final record of Indiana, I don't think it should be seen as a disappointment. I definitely see where that would come into play, but I think that's kind of the middle ground of what you should expect for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I've been back and forth. I know Colin knows I said 9-3 earlier this week. I've said 10-2 other times. I keep going back and forth. If I could say 9.5 wins, I would say it. I'm gonna be, I'm usually the pessimist. John, I think you're like you know me. I feel like usually I'm the under, the under. It's probably not.
I don't remember. What did you predict last year? I think last year I was the optimist. I was really buying in early to the Cignetti hype. I think I went with 8-4 last year, and that was considered wishful thinking for a lot of people last year. I feel like
last year I believed, and I said 6-6. It was like a thing. It was like I believed, and it was funny because I remember telling my friends, I'm like, guys, look at the schedule. Like Indiana could be 6-0. Like it's not the craziest thing to say,
and that happened.
Yeah, I mean, but this year I think it's being not. So you said 8-4 last year is the optimist, 9-3 this year is the pessimist. Funny how things change. I'm going to go 10-2 here. I'm going to say it here. I'm sick of being the pessimist. I think Indiana is better than 10 teams on the schedule. I think Penn State and Oregon have the edge in those two games, and they also happen to be on the road. I think Illinois is close, but it's in Indiana. It's going to be the opening game, Big Ten. I think Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking, and I think that's going to play a huge factor. And, Indiana is going to have that advantage for the first time where it's like home field is really going to matter in Bloomington, and I'm really excited about that.
I've also got to throw one more thing in there that I think bugs me. I very much, and this won't happen to the extent in which it happened back in 2021, but I am very much afraid of the big year, the follow-up drop-off that Indiana experienced after the COVID season. Of course, that was a very weird anomaly, the way things happened with the COVID year, but they went from 6-2, of course, a shortened season, to being 2-10 the following year with a lot of returning guys. You lost your core. I can't remember. They didn't have Kalen DeBoer at that point. And I don't think they didn't have Kane Womack either. So you did have the difference between that and this season. I mean, for once, a lot of things, but you retained everybody on the staff as well, which is a big factor in how things I think will not be a drop off like that. But that factor alone also just, it's a little bug in me that makes me think that things could go wrong in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, the same kind of bug in my head as well. I mean, that 2021 season, Indiana was a top 15 team coming into the year and then got killed at Iowa.
This team's a lower preseason ranking than that team.
So, I mean, I have that in my back of my head, but it's like, this is Cignetti, this isn't Tom Allen, this is a new era. But before we get on to our national picks, a quick message from our sponsors, and we will be right back. At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we carry all the gear you need from the top brands, all at prices you'll love. And now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. We offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. Want to save even more every day? Open and use an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card to get 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors, and have fun out there. We'll be right back, but first we have to talk to you guys about Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Indiana Hoosiers, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code IND20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers throughout the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code IND20. Now back to the rest of this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast. We're back, and we're going to give our Big Ten championship predictions, our Big Ten champion for the 2025 season. Colin, last year we saw Ohio State, it looked like it was going to be them won the national championship and then kind of, choked, fumbled against Michigan, lost out in that opportunity to play in the game. And Oregon, first year in the Big Ten, won the Big Ten championship. Colin, do you see it going Oregon again, or do you have another team winning the Big Ten this year?
I actually have the Penn State Nittany Lions winning the Big Ten. I think that the two teams that'll be in Indianapolis will be Ohio State and Penn State. And I think that Penn State is just narrowly going to edge out Ohio State. And it's funny, I made an entire Big Ten conference predicted every record of each team in the conference. I went game by game, kind of thought, how are these teams going to play at the start? How are they going to play at the end of the season? And I had Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon all finishing at 11-1 and 8-1 in conference. And so the tiebreakers worked out where Ohio State and Penn State would advance to the championship game. Oregon would be left out. And I think that in the OSU versus PSU game in Indy, I have Penn State winning, which will be a reverse of how I see it going in the regular season. I have Ohio State beating Penn State in the regular season, but I think it'll be the Nittany Lions who secure the victory in what is essentially a meaningless game, but also you do still get to call yourselves Big Ten champions. But I think Ohio State will be focused on bigger and better things during that game.
And this is where I agree with Signetti too. He made that big spiel about eliminating Big Ten or conference championship games and essentially having play-in games, which I guess it kind of is. You do get the auto bye. What did they change with the playoff this year? Is there anything changed with the playoff?
No auto bye
anymore.
There's no auto buys. Okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
Top 4 get the bye. It's
okay.
Yeah.
So to spare saying a lot of the same things that Colin said, I do want to go and echo his sentiment that Penn State will be the Big Ten champion. The one thing I will say that, you mentioned it but didn't mention it, is that this was probably, at least in my lifetime, the most talented Penn State team on paper. They have so many returning guys from last year's playoff team that I feel like surprised a lot of people and thought that team could have even gone on to win the national championship. They just couldn't get it done. Also mentioned Tom Allen being on the defensive coordinator staff or on the staff last year as D coordinator. Very interesting little tidbit for that. Not this year, of course, but I think Penn State is primed to finally have not only another Big Ten championship appearance. They lost in the championship game, I believe, one other time with James Franklin. I don't remember who they lost to, but it'll definitely be their best opportunity to do something in quite some time. So I think Penn State will get it done.
So you guys aren't worried about big game James Franklin or, big game Drew Aller, which has kind of been
Penn State proved himself last year enough in the playoffs, I think. I think by not only getting there, and that was 12 teams, but by stepping – I know they played SMU and people thought SMU was outmatched, but they ran the table in that game and then ran the table against Boise State and Ashton Genty. So, and again, I know Mountain West team, and they kind of had an easy road, so to speak, but they still got it done.
You play 2 group of 5 teams in the playoff. It's like a gift.
Well, is SMU? I know they came from the G5, but they were in the ACC.
Come on now,
they should have beaten Clemson in the ACC championship.
Yeah,
I guess, but I do think that Penn State is going to choke in the playoff. Spoiler alert for who my national championship pick is going to be. I'm banking on the fact that Ryan Day and the rest of the Ohio State Buckeyes are thinking about the playoff. I think that they're not going to be as focused on the Big Ten championship versus James Franklin is going to try to stake his entire career on this Big Ten championship game, which I don't want to say meaningless because it obviously has meaning, but with the way the playoff is set up, it almost is it's meaningless because you could win it and then be like Oregon, and we're talking about Oregon as a Big Ten champion, but what is the rest of the country saying? They're saying, oh, they lost in the quarterfinal of the playoff. That's how you'll be remembered. And so I do think that Penn State will win a big game, but I mean, they're Penn State. Come on.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because John and I talked. We were talking before the podcast. We started recording. Ryan Day last year, got the monkey off his back, won the didn't beat Michigan, but won the national championship. And so is this James Franklin's his turn to win the big game and get the monkey off his back. I'm going in a different direction for my Big Ten champion. I'm going to team you mentioned, Colin. I'm going Oregon. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Dante Moore later in the podcast, but he is the reason why I really believe in him as a player. Was the number 2 overall player coming in his class, committed to UCLA, played his freshman year. It was kind of rough. And then last year sat behind Dylan Gabriel, and I think that was the best thing for him. He's not the runner that Dylan Gabriel or like a Bo Nix is, but is a passer, decision maker. I think he's one of the best in college. I think he's going to establish himself as one of the best quarterbacks, not only in the Big Ten, in the country this year. But I guess we're moving right into my next topic. It was the Heisman pick, and I'm just going to go first because I'm already talking about him. It's Dante Moore. I think I want to say BetMGM had him when I looked. It was like plus 2,000. So he's like, he's kind of got to scroll a little bit to find him. And I think when you look at college football, I think this is like the most wide open it's really been for not only like the Heisman, but like the national champion, which we'll talk about in just a second. I just think Dante Moore at Oregon, we've seen quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel, Bo Nix succeed in that offense. I think he's as talented, if not more talented than both of those guys. And I think, as Michael Jordan once said, the ceiling is the roof for Dante Moore. John, who's your Heisman pick?
I'm going with Jeremiah Smith. I think Colin McMahon earlier, he was a Jeremiah Smith hater. And again, he was taken up for an IU guy, so I can't really blame him. But I think this dude is one of the more gifted wide receivers we've seen, not only at the college level, but I'm sure he'll have a great NFL career as well. This dude is going to make plenty of noise once the season really gets underway. You're going to have 2 Heisman candidates in week 1 with Arch Manning and Jeremiah Smith. Mm-hmm. And the winner of that game, or maybe even the winner of that game just statistically, maybe not necessarily the team winner, might be the initial favorite to kind of run away with it at that point. But of course, it's a long season. But it very well could be a battle of who wins the Heisman from the get-go with Texas and Ohio State. And I think Jeremiah Smith, you look at last year, 1,315 yards, 15 touchdowns, 76 receptions as a freaking freshman in an era where freshmen don't matter nearly as much as they used to. I think this guy's going to win the Heisman. Now, I don't really think it's going to be that close, to be honest.
Colin, who do you got for your Heisman pick?
I'm going to go with Garrett Nussmeier. I think that he's a guy that is on an LSU team that I don't really see as a playoff threat. Obviously, they're going to be in conversations. I don't have them making the playoff personally, but I do think that they're going to have an elite offense. And what we saw from Jaden Daniels is kind of going to be, I would say, a version of what we could see from Garrett Nussmeier. And truth be told, I'm not really high on many of the Heisman candidates. Right now, Arch Manning is the betting favorite, and I think that is a bit interesting to have a guy who's never been QB1 at the college level be the favorite for, essentially the QB1 award. Obviously, John, you went with a wide receiver, but most years we do see a quarterback win the Heisman, and I think that Arch Manning is going to have some growing pains. I do think when he goes up to Columbus and plays Ohio State, it's going to be a defensive game. It's going to be tough. It's going to be gritty, and I don't think that he's going to impress all that much. As the season goes on, he certainly will. He's a very talented quarterback. We all know that, but I do think with the body of work that Garrett Nussmeier is going to have at the end of the season, I think that an LSU is going to be just good enough to get him over that cusp. Obviously, they're not going to give a Heisman to a bad team, but they don't necessarily have to make the playoff for him to get that award. And so I think I'm kind of torn between him and Cade Klubnik. Obviously, they face off in week 1. So like the OSU-Texas game, we have another game that could potentially decide the Heisman in the first week of the season. But I'm going to go Nussmeier. It's not necessarily my most confident pick out there, but I will say if the cards fall right for Fernando Mendoza, he could end up being a Heisman level player. And it is interesting. We all talk about how wide open the Heisman is, how the national champion is. I think that sets up perfectly for what Indiana's doing. I really think that they may not have the best shot, but they have pretty close shot as any to not only have a Heisman caliber quarterback, but also possibly make a national championship run.
Yeah, I mean, the season is as wide open as it's ever been. I think, LSU, that what Nussmeier, if he does do it, would be the third Heisman winner at LSU, the quarterback in the last 5 years. Burrow and Jaden Daniels obviously came first. But yeah, I mean, I think Nussmeier-Klubnik, that's going to be one of the best games of the season. We get it week 1, just like Ohio State, Texas. 2 Heisman, it feels like eliminators, and not like national champion eliminators, because you can lose a game now in this new era of college football.
You can lose a couple games.
Yeah, and it's, if you're Ohio State, it's, getting these games in week 1, it's awesome, and it's so great that it's, college football's here. We had week 0, we had Farmageddon, but, we're finally back. This is peak, summer's kind of over. It's Labor Day weekend. Summer's going to be over in a couple days, and fall's here, and we got football. But, mentioned, I think it's the most wide open it's been in years. Colin, I'm going to start with you. Your national champion pick right now we're recording August 27th. This is going to come out the 28th. Who do you have?
So I think I might have the same national champion as you based on what you've said before, but I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks. I do not have them making the Big Ten championship because of how the tiebreakers work out. And honestly, I think that's a blessing because they'll get a week off. They'll get a week of rest. They'll get a week to kind of game plan. Obviously they won't pinpoint their exact playoff opponent, but they will be able to kind of get a feel for the teams that are going to be in that range, maybe 2 or 3 teams that they will most likely play. And so I think that Dante Moore, like you mentioned, is a very talented quarterback. And Oregon is probably the most storied program in college football history to never win a national championship. And I think that Dan Lanning, what he's built, and just the overall culture of Oregon football, I think it's time for Oregon to win one. I think last year they were the best team in college football. I think that they got tripped up by an Ohio State team they were hungry, man. They were hungry to prove the doubters wrong. And they had momentum after Tennessee, and they got in a game where they just caught lightning in a bottle, and they kept it going all the way to the national championship. But over the course of the entire season, Oregon was the better team. I know there was some controversy in the game out in Eugene back in October, but I think that Oregon proved that they were the better team on all 3 levels last season, and I think that they're slept on this year. They really are. And I do think that they're going to drop a game when they go to Beaver Stadium and play Penn State just because of how tough that environment is and flying across the entire country. It's going to be tough for them, but I think that's the only loss they're going to take. I don't think they're going to make the Big Ten championship, but I do think that they will be hoisting the CFP championship trophy come the end of January.
Yeah, well, I do have them winning. I like that pick, Colin. I like it a lot. I don't have them winning at all, despite having them win the Big Ten. I think the SEC finally, gets that natty again and takes it. I hate to say this, but it's a fake SEC team. It's Texas.
Okay, I'll take. I can expect a fake SEC, or I can take that.
It's less about Arch Manning. I think Arch Manning is really talented, but there's still the question marks. How good is he actually? You mentioned the Heisman favorite, despite not being the number 1. This is the first time he's been the number 1. But the rest of that roster is stacked. It's NFL guys after NFL guys. Ryan Wingo, the sophomore, stud. Wisner, the running back, really talented. Steve Sarkisian is really, he's brought Texas back. I hate to say it. I've been Texas. It was fun to make fun of them when they're back, and then the next year they'd go 7-5. But it really does feel like Texas football is back as it's ever been since they kind of had that fall off. John, who do you have for your national champion pick?
Real quick, I failed to mention whenever I was talking about Penn State's Big Ten championship appearances. For some reason, I forgot they played in the Big Ten championship last year. I think it's because Ohio State went on that run and won the entire thing. It just blinded me to them. Ohio State didn't even make the Big Ten championship, which it goes along with your argument, Colin, about how Oregon can you take advantage of that and make it run all the way to the national title. So I do like that pick. However, For some reason, I just think this is James Franklin's year. I know I kind of went on about it earlier. I think this is big game James, as Drew mentioned. I think last year you saw Ryan Day when everybody, I mean, the noise behind Ohio State's with their fan base after they had lost to Michigan. You had never seen so many angry fans with Ryan Day after that game, and that was not a good Michigan team that they lost to. It wasn't a terrible Michigan team, but it was not a good Michigan team that won in Ohio Stadium last year. And Ryan Day, with his back against the wall, was able to figure things out. Now, if James Franklin were presented with that exact scenario, would he get it done? We'll never know because he's not the coach at Ohio State, and that's not how the regular season works. But I do think with the way that their fan base is ready to see him take that next step and no longer be outmatched by, the elite of the elites like Ohio State. Maybe they'll get an opportunity to play at Georgia, that sort of thing. You could even throw Oregon in there. Maybe they can get revenge on them after losing to them in the Big Ten championship game. I think once they get that first big win, and it doesn't have to be the national championship game. It can be that Big Ten championship that you were talking about, Drew or Colin, saying that that's going to be his Super Bowl, if you will. But not only do I think that won't be his Super Bowl, his magnum opus, whatever you want to call it, I think that's going to be his opportunity to kind of take that win, not say that that's the pinnacle, but also take that and run with it and then realize that, I've always had this talent in this program and I've finally gotten one monkey off my back. Let's do what's in front of us, take with what's in front of us and go win a national championship, similar to what Ohio State was able to do last year after they bounced back from their loss to Michigan. So that's a long-winded way in me saying that Penn State's going to get it done. Also, honorable mention, I think Clemson's going to be your national runner-up. I don't know why. I think here's one thing. Dabo Swinney, he's kind of been getting his groove back the last couple of years. And again, maybe this is just the bias of knowing Tom Allen. I think Tom Allen is a great fit for someone like Dabo Swinney in that program. They both kind of have the same ideologies, I feel like. And I think if they can have their entire staff on the same page, and if Cade Klubnik is as good as he's advertised, I think that's a really good equation to kind of, we already saw Tom Allen help one team get to the semifinals. I think you could see that and then some potentially with Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, so much continuity on that Clemson team. I was just thinking, you bringing this up, Tom Allen on Clemson. I would love to see Clemson versus Alabama in the playoff. You get Tom Allen versus all his disciples. How awesome would that be?
Oh, that would be awesome.
Rick Sheridan, Kane Womack, all coached under Tom Allen. That'd be a heck.
You'd have an Indiana national championship, and we never in the weirdest way possible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was really funny because like the Washington, there was like you had DeBoer and Penix. It was like Indiana fans claiming it. Now it's Indiana fans are made the playoff last year, looking to make a return. So it's
Alabama's like, Indiana South is what it is now.
No, literally. But I think that's all we got. Is there anything I'm missing from either of you guys?
Anything that we're missing? Let's just. I feel like I'm officially now excited for week one. Now that we've kind of had, I know I had my episode released earlier this week. Go check that out if you haven't already. In touch with Indiana Sports. We talked with Rob Lauer, the PA announcer for Memorial Stadium. He talks about kind of the experience of of being at game day this year. So I'm excited for week one. Hopefully, I know there's not. I know it's not a sellout just yet. I don't know if it will be, but hopefully we get full, at least close to full stands for this second season with Kurt Signetti.
Yeah, Colin, anything you want to plug?
Nothing else besides just go check out all the great coverage we have at thehoosier.com. I mean, it's game week. We have multiple stories every single day, previewing Old Dominion, looking at, stuff on Indiana's end. I mean, we have it all. And, if you feel like we don't have it all, let us know in the forums what we can do to be better, because we're all about creating the best IU athletics community out there. And because it's football season, everyone's excited. The fans are excited, the players are excited. Of course, us as the media are certainly excited. So it's a great time, and we'll see how this season goes. But again, I have to reiterate, Indiana does have a chance at making a national championship run. So kind of make the most of that, because it doesn't happen very often in any sport, and especially for football. I don't know if it's ever happened. They made the Rose Bowl one time before, so we'll probably have to go back then for the last time Indiana has a serious shot at being the best team in college football.
Yeah, why not? Why not this team? Why not Kurt Signetti? But yeah, as Colin said, all things IU athletics. Make sure you guys are following the Hoosier on 3 on X/Twitter. If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to the Hoosier premium content, including exclusive interviews, scouting reports, and access to the message board that Colin just talked about. Also, guys, subscribe to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube. And make sure you're following Talking About the Hoosiers on Spotify and hit that like button. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back.